Lindy says, good news. The passing game is fixed with the addition of top-rated freshman Bryce Underwood and Fresno State transfer Mikey Keene, transfer wideouts Donovan McCulley and Anthony Simpson from Indiana and UMass, respectively, can be counted on for productive seasons. I think for one of those guys, you can for sure count on a productive season. It seems like Donovan McCulley is right now the closest thing this team has to a bona fide number one wide receiver. Simpson's a little more interesting. We've talked about him before on here.
Yeah. But to me, like the fixed part has everything to do with the quarterback position. You know, they could have ran it back with the same group of receivers they had a year ago, but with these quarterbacks that they now have on the roster, and it would look completely different. And I wrote right under, quoting Lindy's there, that it's going to feel like a breath of fresh air, even if it's not a dynamic passing attack, even if it's not an above average, power 4 passing attack, even if it's just average, which I think they have much more upside than that. But I'm just trying to give it a baseline here as we look at it. I think it's going to look so much better. And then you add in the fact that you did bring in some guys who might be able to take it to another level from what we saw a year ago from a pass catching standpoint. Now you lost Colston Loveland, so that hurts. But wide receiver wise, I don't think you can get much worse. I mean, Tyler Morris was your leading receiver and he left, but he wasn't very productive. And there were times too last year where guys were somewhat open, but the quarterbacks couldn't find them. So again, I think to me, it comes so much down to the quarterback play and what Bryce Underwood's going to bring. And if it's Mikey Keene at different points in the season, what he could bring as well, because it was just so subpar, beyond subpar what we saw, about as bad as it gets. And it's not a knock on any individual because they did their best and they were the ones thrown in there. But it just so beyond anything we thought was really possible. Because, Anthony, I bring this up a decent amount, but you and I and Chris doing these podcasts last summer at the same time, we would get some questions in our mailbag saying, well, if we're Iowa on offense, but we have a great defense, what can we be? And we would laugh that off and say, there's no way they're going to be Iowa. And guess what? They were worse. So it was that bad offensively. I have a stat for you. I just need to double check and pull up real quick that illustrates this. But I think it's just going to be a completely different ballgame when you think about a quarterback that can just make more throws and that is going to be able to see the field a little bit better. And, you're going to go through growing pains with a freshman if it is Underwood out there. But still, I think it's going to be a lot better than what we saw last year. And that's going to open up everything with this entire offense.
Well, and the stat, too, as you look up your stat, the one that always stuck out to me was they were the only team in FBS last year without a passing play of 40 or more yards, which that's your scheme and your production was so bad, you couldn't even benefit off of a busted coverage or anything like that. That's all it takes is one. And oftentimes, there's multiple plays that are to be had there, even if you're below average. So it was much worse than we ever could have imagined. It gives me a lot more skepticism heading into the season, but you look at the chemical mixture of what they have with, at the very least, like we know that Bryce Underwood's final form, I don't think we're going to see this season. So you temper expectations there, but with what we think he can be mixed with the known commodity that a guy like Mikey Keene is, and even to a certain extent, he's an unknown commodity because all of his production has come at the group of 5 level. But the bar is just, we're going to look back in a few years on that passing game and from last year and be like, how did it ever get that bad? And I already feel that way, but that by so many metrics and when you look at the totality of the circumstances last year, that might be the worst passing game Michigan's had since the forward pass has been, a notable part of the offense. So,
well, can I give you my number? Because this number is the worst in program history in a category that I want you to guess. And it includes the years that we're talking about where teams didn't really pass much. The number is 8.8. What do you think that number is correlated to from last season?
8.8. I mean, it's not yards per attempt.
That would be good.
That's for sure. that would be elite. Usually anything over 7 is pretty darn good. Is it average yards? Is it yards per reception for everyone?
Yeah, it's yards per completion, which is the same thing as yards per reception. 8.8. lowest in program history for a season. The second lowest was 2008, the infamous 2008 season, and that was 10.4.
Yeah.
Okay, that was 1.6 points higher. So, I mean, that's just one stat because, you're looking at yards per attempt. I agree. Like, that is mostly what I go off of when I look at, if I had to pick one stat, right? Of course, you take the whole picture and you look at multiple different statistics, but that is the main one for me. But that just shows just how everything was just such a slog last year offensively when you had to go through the air. And even the Ohio State game, which I think I mentioned last week, it was on Father's Day night. It was Michigan Day on BTN. And I'm sitting there watching it with my dad, and we were laughing at how even those long drives that Michigan kept alive late in the second half that were crucial, even the one that ended in a Davis Warren interception was massive because they took off, I think, close to 9 minutes off the clock. But the first downs they got were like right at the marker. It was by by the nose of the football. Everything was just such a struggle. So, and even we saw a little bit of it in the spring game with Underwood, and we'll see Mikey Keene when he gets out there this fall. Like, it's just a kind of a different animal when you have a guy like that back there. Now, what I also went on to write in this article was there's a chance he's 2018 Trevor Lawrence, true freshman, and is just unbelievable. One of the best freshman seasons we can ever remember. It's not likely to happen. So if he's not that, then he's going to need a lot to go right around him. And, there are some questions about some of the things around him, like the receiving core, like the offensive line. But at the very least, it's just going to look completely different offensively through the air.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence's freshman season. And mind you, I think Kelly Bryant started the first 3 or 4 games that year.
Something like that, yeah.
He threw for 3,280 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. That's not happening. And if it does, holy crap, did they ever hit the jackpot with that guy? Trevor Lawrence stepped into an infrastructure that was a lot more Trevor Lawrence and freshman quarterback friendly, I think. And I think for Michigan to max out what Bryce Underwood can do as a freshman, I mean, obviously you want him to be closer to Trevor Lawrence on that scale than, I'll compare a local guy, the last 5-star guy to come out of Michigan. Dante Moore started a couple games his freshman year at UCLA, and it was a roller coaster. And Dylan Raiola last year at Nebraska was a roller coaster. DJ Lagway last year, bit of a roller coaster at times. So you kind of have to bake in this expectation that if they put a decent amount on this guy's plate, there are going to be mistakes that are made. But still, I'd rather make a mistake with Bryce Underwood chucking the ball 50 yards down the field than, not being able to throw the forward pass at all. So by virtue of that, Michigan just in a much healthier place at quarterback in the passing game than they were last year. And that doesn't mean they're where they like to be. That doesn't mean they're where they're going to be, but it is a much better place to be as you continue to peel back the layers and build on what was a pretty good end to last season.